Hello everyone and welcome to lecture number 13. As you notice, we're now in period 5, which covers the years 1844 to 1877. Now this is the pre-Civil War, and then right after the Civil War, Reconstruction era is what this period will be covering. And this is our first lecture in period 5, and I have entitled it Popular Sovereignty. So we have a new big picture question for period 5. As the nation expanded, tensions, especially over slavery, led to a civil war, the course and aftermath of which transformed American society. So yes, we'll spend a lot of time leading up to the events that lead up to the Civil War, especially the 1850s. We'll talk about some of the important aspects of the Civil War itself, how it changes our society completely, especially in the area of religion. We're going to talk a lot about that in class. And then the Reconstruction that comes afterwards, rebuilding the South and trying to make it more like the North, and how that basically messes up as well. We have obviously new key concepts. We're going to focus on these at various moments. We'll be looking at some aspects of 5.1 today. This idea of becoming more connected with the world as it pursued an expansionist foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. That's our Mexican War that we're going to have. We also have expansion ideas towards Central America, towards Japan. America gets involved in Japan during this time period. 5.2 looks specifically at the debates that lead to the Civil War here, intensified by expansion and deepening regional divisions, the South versus the North, the East versus the West, slavery, economics, cultural issues. Again, this is our main things that lead right to the Civil War. And 5.3 will deal with the Reconstruction era that comes after the Civil War and how the federal government helps or tries to help to give civil rights to former slaves. So let's look at 5.1 a little closely. I'm making up words. Wait a second. Coffee time. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so we're going to look closer now at 5.1, but now Roman numeral 1, letter A and B. Now remember, I put period 5 up on Edmodo, so hopefully you will print that out yourself so you can have these concept charts and the curriculum chart that helps us explain what exactly we're testing here. So again, we're talking about the Mexican War. So here's our territorial expansion into what is parts of Mexico. Why did we do this? Well, it tells us here, fueled by economic and national security interests. Also because of racial, cultural superiority, Herrenvolk philosophy, that sort of stuff. That's why we go to war with Mexico. All right. These acquisitions of this new territory, what does it do? It increased ideological conflicts. The North and the South have two different ideas as to how the country should be handled, how it should run, how it should develop. By acquiring all this land, it intensified the differences between those two ideas of the North and the South. So here you have test questions built right into that as to why we go to war with Mexico and how it intensifies conflict. Here's a definition of manifest destiny. I ask you on the video logs to look at this one particularly, 5.1, Roman numeral 1, letter A, and see in here if you can get yourself a definition of manifest destiny. And B, it specifically again goes into, okay, we win the war in Mexico. Well, what happens? Well, heated controversy over what? Either allowing or forbidding slavery in these new acquired territories. The Mexican War is absolutely the beginning of the Civil War. What happens here, and so this video is not going to talk about the Mexican War. We're going to do that in class on Monday. So any of students who perhaps are not my student, maybe you're listening to this, here's some good reasons as to why the Mexican War really messes up our country. But to get any idea of what the Mexican War was, hopefully your teacher will cover that with you in class. But we are going to look at these two examples today, the Wilmot Proviso and popular sovereignty. Now, as far as anything else in 5.1, much of this deals with afterwards, but I want to look at this one little statement here in point B of 5.1, Roman numeral 2, economic opportunities, and in the West, a gold rush is going to happen. And that's really going to mess things up and also help us lead directly to a civil war. Let's look at two interesting posters here. Look at these two posters for a second. Now again, this is a question I ask you on the video logs. Here is the two candidates for the election of 1848. Now, the Mexican War is over. James K. Polk was president during the war, and one of the promises he made is that he'd be a one-term president, so he's not going to run again. Plus, his health is extremely bad on top of it. So the Whigs nominate Zachary Taylor. He is a famous war general during the Mexican War. He wins many victories, becomes very, very popular in America. Another little sip of coffee there. And this is Lewis Cass, also a war general. He's nominated by the Democrats. So both the Whigs and the Democrats nominate generals to run in their election. But look at these two political posters. First of all, ask yourself, do you think the Whigs made this poster and the Democrats made this poster? Do you think that's so? Or do you think the Whigs made the poster on the Democrats and the Democrats made the poster on the Whigs? Think about it for a moment. What are these two political posters, these political cartoons, what are they trying to tell you about both these candidates? I'm not going to give you the answer. I want you to look at it. You can pause for a minute and really study this in detail. And this is one of the questions I ask you in the video logs. Let's go into the election and see something interesting. All right, Wilmot Proviso. Now, David Wilmot is a representative in Congress from the state of Pennsylvania, which is considered a northern state now at this time period. And 1846, the war with Mexico is only 3 months old when they decide to come up with what we call an appropriations bill in Congress. Appropriations means to get a lot of money for something. They're trying to raise $2 million to offer it to Mexico to buy California, to maybe hopefully not prosecute this war any further than it has to go. And whenever you come up with bills in Congress, there's always people that like to add on other things, and we'll talk about that later on in class 2. But David Wilmot wants to add a provision. Proviso is Latin for a provision onto this war appropriations bill. And basically what he says, that he would like to see that any land acquired from Mexico, which would be New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, since they were part of Mexico, and the Mexicans had outlawed slavery, Mexico had outlawed slavery, there was no slavery in that land, then that land must remain free. That's what this provision says. And you can't possibly imagine the anger that this creates. America's at war with Mexico, and all of a sudden this issue is dropped like a bomb in the middle of Congress, that we're fighting a war for land and we're not going to allow slaves to go there. Remember, I've told you this in class, basically the War of Mexico is a southern war. It's the southern states that are really pushing for this war because they want to spread slavery. Now here's a northern representative in Congress who's making a provision that we don't allow slaves in that territory. Texas is now in the United States. It already has slaves, so it gets to keep its slaves. But no more slaves after that. And there is a lot of fighting. It does pass in the House. The House of Representatives passed this provision, but it fails in the Senate. The Senate will not pass it. At the end of the war, when the Mexican War is over in 1848, and it's the Treaty of Hidalgo, Guadalupe, they try to bring back the Wilmot Proviso and make it part of the treaty with Mexico. And again, it causes a lot of anger. A lot of bitter anger is now being developed because of this. So this Mexican War, where you think war often unites Americans together for a cause, no, it helped divide us even more because of slavery. Now, slavery is the main issue of the day, and it is tearing this country apart. So you would think the election of 1848 would be all about slavery. Not really. Lewis Cass, a general, he becomes known as the father of popular sovereignty. The one thing he does preach throughout his campaign is this concept of popular sovereignty. Well, what is that? Well, that's Popular is the people, sovereignty is the right to rule. So the people have the right to rule, and that's part of democracy. You prove that right by, you know what it is? How do you prove your right to rule in your state or your country or your little town or city? The vote. Yes, the vote. So he starts to preach that why is the federal government getting involved in what states have slaves or not? Why are even state governments getting involved? Allow the people within the state or a territory that is eventually going to apply for statehood, allow them to vote to decide if they want to have slaves or they want to be free. Popular sovereignty. This becomes another theory that permeates now the Democrats throughout the 1850s, and it's another one of those theories that's going to just tear this country apart. The idea of popular sovereignty. It seems like an easy fix. Just let the people decide. But there's too many people now growing in the North that don't want slavery. And they don't want it just to allow Southerners to spread to all these new territories and then allow them to vote, because you know they're just going to vote for slaves. So Northerners are going to start pouring into these territories as well. And that's really what's going to be a major, major catalyst. Northerners and Southerners pouring into these new territories, trying to vote to make sure that either the state goes slave or free. It's going to be a major catalyst of the Civil War. This becomes a terrible, terrible idea of the 1850s. The Whig candidate, Zachary Taylor, simply ran on a campaign, Taylor Fever, because America is all happy that this famous general is running for president, I guess. He never says anything about slaves. Interestingly, he is a slave owner, but he's not going to comment on it. The Whig Party refuses to even talk about slavery. Another interesting trivia, Zachary Taylor is our only president, spoiler alert, he does win this election, he's our only president to not vote in his own election. That's because as a general, he never established any permanent residency in any one state. He was always traveling from state to state to state. So at the time of the election, he didn't have any residency anywhere, so he couldn't vote legally. The Whigs completely fall apart after this election. They win it, but they're divided now. You have Northern conscious Whigs who are becoming abolitionists, and they want to see slavery end, and a lot of Southern Cotton Whigs who are slave owners, and they want to keep slavery going. Remember, the only reason why this party exists, they hated Andrew Jackson. Now that Jackson's gone, he's passed away by now, there's nothing to keep this party together. There was a major third party that ran in this election, the Free Soil Party. They nominated Martin Van Buren, of all people. Martin Van Ruin, right? They ran him as their candidate. But they ran on the platform that the Wilmot Proviso must be passed. Zachary Taylor wins an election. He should have had an easy election, but by 1849, gold is discovered in California. And we're going to talk about that specifically in class on Wednesday. And that is going to just about tear the country apart. Gold. The 49ers are coming. The great gold rush for California, which is going to also help lead to the Civil War. All right. Thank you for listening. For further reading, please take a look at these pages in your book so you have a better idea of what's going on and why popular sovereignty becomes a major issue and a major problem for America. All right. Goodbye now.